Alright, welcome to another episode or video on whatever study I decide to do today. Uh, Basically, in this channel, I like to share some of the very deep dive studies I do, either in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, that type stuff. And I think we'll just jump right into it today. The topic I'm going to talk about is Isaiah 29, which includes a prophecy or a story that is considered a prophecy at times. So Isaiah 29, the word of a book that is sealed. So the text in question that we're going to talk about is, "And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, Read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. And the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, Read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I am not learned." So this text is very prominent in, I'll just say it, I guess, LDS or Mormon theology, teaching, tradition. And it usually, sometimes it is read in isolation, and other times they try to use context, I'll say, but usually it's in isolation. It is claimed to be a prophecy of a story that happens in the future, but we're going to do a deep dive on context and the story to see what it is talking about. So, Ariel in this is symbolic for Jerusalem in this passage. It can either mean Lion of God, or it may refer to an altar of burning, as it is similar to that word in Hebrew. Here's the two Hebrew words. It could be referring, and I mentioned that because it could be Lion of God, symbolic meaning for Jerusalem, or it could be altar of burning, which would reference the Temple of Solomon. So the text says, "Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. Add ye year to year, let them kill sacrifices. Yet I will distress Ariel, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be unto me as Ariel. And I will camp against thee round about, and will lay siege against thee with a mount, and I will raise forts against thee. And thou shalt be brought down, and shalt speak out of the ground, and thy speech shall be low out of the dust, and thy voice shall be as of one that hath a familiar spirit out of the ground, and thy speech shall whisper out of the dust. Moreover, the multitude of thy strangers shall be like small dust, and the multitude of the terrible ones shall be as chaff, and that passeth away. Yea, it shall be as at an instant suddenly. Thou shalt be visited of the Lord of hosts, with thunder, and with earthquake, and with great noise, with storm and tempest, and the flame of devouring fire. And the multitude of all the nations that fight against Ariel, even all that fight against her and her munition, and that distress her, shall be as a dream of a night vision. It shall even be as when a hungry man dreameth, and behold, he eateth, but he awaketh, and his soul is empty. Or as when a thirsty man drinketh, and behold, he drinketh, but he awaketh, and behold, he is faint, and his soul hath appetite. So shall the multitude of all nations be that fight against Mount Zion." That is Isaiah 29, 1 through 8. "Stay yourselves, and wonder. Cry ye out, and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. For the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes. The prophets and your rulers, the seers, hath he covered. And the vision of all of them," I will say that I add that for context, "the vision of all of them is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, Read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. And the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, Read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I am not learned. Wherefore the Lord said, Forasmuch as this people draw near me with their mouths, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Therefore, before Behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among the people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. Woe unto them that seek deep to hide their counsels from the Lord, and their works are in the dark. And they say, Who seeth us, and who knoweth us? Surely your turning of these things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the work say of him that made it, He hath made me not? Or shall the thing framed say of him that framed it, He hath no understanding? So, on a note of the last one, it says at the very top, Stay yourselves in wonder, cry ye out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. And then it says, He hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep. He's closed the eyes of the prophets, rulers, and seers, in as much as the vision of all of them is become as the word of a book that is sealed. Basically, there's a comparison here, say, or like a simile. A simile is a comparison using like or as, and it's saying that the vision of those prophets is like or as if you were to take a book to someone and say, hey, read this, and then the person's like, I can't, because it's sealed. Or you take it to another person and you're like, how about you read this? And the guy's like, I don't know how to read. Such is the way in which God has turned off, I guess you could say, the speech to the prophets. So here's another example of it. In Amos 8:11 through 12, it says, Behold, the day comes, saith the Lord, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst of water, but of hearing the words of the Lord, and they will wander from sea to sea, and from north even to the east. They shall run to and fro, and to seek the word of the Lord, and they shall not find it. Two things about this. Wander is sometimes translated as stagger, which shows that there's a common theme across, or in the Bible, where it refers to these people as staggering because they don't have the word of the Lord, right? In the other one, it used stagger in terms of being drunk, but not with wine. And then in this one, I will point out, it says that they will wander from sea to sea and from north even to the east, right? From sea to sea and from north even to east. Why does it not say north to south, east to west? Technically, that's because the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, it might be the Mediterranean, not Mediterranean, the two seas between Jerusalem, in between Jerusalem, there's two seas, right? It says they will go from those two seas, and then from north even to the east. That's because it's talking about the northern tribe of Israel. That's why it's from the north even to the east. I don't have a picture of that, but I guess if you disagree, you can dispute that and tell me why I'm wrong in the comments. But let's see. Moving on here. As per the last part of that, it says, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among the people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. Concerning that phrase, in 1 Corinthians 1:17 through 21, we'll say, the marvelous work and a wonder is the gospel of Jesus Christ. For Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect. For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto them which are saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. That is a quote from the chapter. The wisdom of the wise shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. So he quotes that in talking about the gospel. Now this is 1 Corinthians. Paul wrote this after Jesus Christ, during his ministry, right? And it says, Where is the wise, where is the scribe, where is the disputer of this world? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. He's basically making the argument, I guess you could say, or just using that quote to say that through the gospel, God made the wisdom of the wise. He destroyed it, and he brought to nothing the understanding of the prudent through this. Moving on, we'll go back to the text. Isaiah 29:17 through 18. Is it not a very little while, and Lebanon will be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field will be esteemed as a forest? And in that day shall the deaf hear the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. So, right here, what again are the words of the book? That the deaf shall hear, and the blind shall see. For the Lord, if we review, for the Lord hath poured upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes of the prophets and the rulers and the seers hath he covered, and the vision of all of them is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, right? So when it says, in that day shall the deaf hear the words of the book, it is mixing the simile from before. A simile is a comparison using like or as, and it's connecting it to the future. So it's still using the figurative speech, right? The deaf will hear the words of the book that is sealed, which was the word of the Lord, right? The word of the Lord has been turned off to the prophets, seers, and rulers. So in that day, the deaf will hear the words. It is saying, basically, the word of the Lord shall return after he has closed the eyes or the vision of the prophets, rulers, and seers. What is Jesus Christ named or called in John 1:1? It says in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Right? Jesus Christ is the Word of God returning, is the argument, I guess, that I'm making on this. So, if we go back to continuing on, Isaiah 29:19 through 24, the meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among them shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. For the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity are cut off. They make a man an offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproveth in the gate, and turn aside the just for a thing of naught. Therefore thus saith the Lord, who redeemed Abraham, concerning the house of Jacob, Jacob shall not now be ashamed, neither shall his face wax pale, but when he seeth his children, the work of mine hands, in the midst of him, they shall sanctify my name, and sanctify the Holy One of Jacob, and shall fear the God of Israel. They also that erred in spirit shall come to understanding, and they that murmured shall learn doctrine. The terrible one and the scorner, and all that watch for iniquity, who are they? Right? The terrible one, all that watch for iniquity. Previously it said the scorner, right? Who are they? Jesus Christ identifies them with the Pharisees, because he quotes this in Matthew 15:7 through 9. You hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, saying, this people draw nigh unto me with their mouth, and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, but in vain do they worship, but in vain they do worship me, teaching for the doctrines the commandments of men. And that was from verse 13 of Isaiah 29 on the last page. And then right here it says, therefore the Lord thus saith the Lord, who redeemed Abraham. Jesus identifies himself as that God. And of the second highlight, Jesus was the God of Abraham. Truly, truly, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. John 5:58. I'm, I guess, making the connection that this is Jesus. Moving on. To recap what context we have read about this so far, Isaiah chapter 29 foretells the time of silence. So the Lord has closed the eyes of the prophets, rulers, and kings. All of their vision is like as if they were to take a sealed scroll to someone who can read, saying, read this, they say, and then the person says, it is sealed. Or take it to someone who can't read, saying, read this, and the person says, I can't read. Because the word of the Lord is turned off, he won't speak to them. And then it says, for as much as the people draw near unto me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precepts of men. This one was quoted as talking about the Pharisees by Jesus. In 1 Corinthians 1:17 through 21, therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work. That's identified by Paul. The marvelous work is the gospel of Jesus Christ in that reference. But when he seeth his children, the work of mine hands, in the midst of him, they shall sanctify my name, and sanctify the Holy One of Israel, and shall hear the God of Israel. that, what does that word say? Erred in spirit shall come to understanding, and they that murmured shall learn doctrine. This seems to be about worshiping God, and by extension, Jesus Christ in the early church. Now, after reading the context of what this chapter is about, connecting its references to other passages in the Old Testament, as well as connecting to the New Testament, let's review how the LDS Church views this scripture passage. The LDS interpretation has a whole chapter in the Book of Mormon, 2 Nephi 27 to be exact, and a story in the history of the church claiming that Isaiah 29 is a prophecy about a specific story during the translation of the Book of Mormon. Because the whole chapter of 2 Nephi 27 is too long to go through, I will explain the gist of it. And if you think that to some way I'm dishonest, you can go read it for yourself, I guess, to double check. So, 2 Nephi 27, Joseph Smith in... I put first right there, look at that. Alright, in 2 Nephi 27, he rewrites much of Isaiah 29. Some of it he quotes, but he adds things here and there to change the meaning. At least that's what I think, right? As Isaiah 29 says, the vision of all is as the words of a book that is sealed. The Book of Mormon paints it as if it is a prophecy of the story happening for real. For instance, it claims that the plates of Nephi that Nephi is writing on will be translated in the future, but his servant, that's usually interpreted as Joseph Smith because he's the one doing it, and there will be only 3 witnesses, maybe some more. That's in 2 Nephi 27, 12 through 13. They will take the translated work to a scholar who is interpreted as being a guy named Charles Anthon and test the translation, and he will say that he cannot, for it is sealed. That is 2 Nephi 27, 15 through 18, right? So that it creates this idea that this is a real story that happens, and it's a prophecy of it, and it's fulfilled in the Book of Mormon, or it's prophesied as well in the Book of Mormon, and then prophecy of the story, right? Well, moving on, here is Joseph Smith History 1:64 through 65. This is the story, or the claim of the story, per Joseph Smith's own history, right? So a man named Martin Harris, who helped fund the printing of the Book of Mormon in 1830, helped Joseph Smith write his history in 1838. And it says, I went to the city of New York and presented the characters which had been translated with the translation thereof to Professor Charles Anthon, a gentleman celebrated for his literary attainments. Professor Anthon stated that the translation was correct, more so than any he had seen translated from the Egyptian. I then showed him those which were not yet translated, and he said that they were Egyptian, Chaldaic, Assyriac, and Arabic. And he said they were true characters. He gave me a certificate certifying to the people of Palmyra that they were true characters, and that the translation of such of them as had been translated was also correct. I took the certificate and I put it in my pocket, and was just leaving the house when Mr. Anthon called me back and asked me how the young man found out that there were gold plates in the place where he had found them. I answered that an angel of God had revealed it unto him. He then said to me, let me see that certificate. I accordingly took it out of my pocket and gave it to him. When he took it and tore it into pieces, saying that there was no such thing now as ministering angels, and that if I would bring the plates to him, he would translate them. I informed him that part of the plates were sealed, and that I was forbidden to bring them. He replied, I cannot read a sealed book. Joseph Smith History 1:64 through 65. So, the aforementioned story has no proof, as the specific point of the story was that Charles Anthon ripped up and burned the letter of authenticity. Just like the claim of the Book of Mormon, the gold plates that Joseph Smith translated were taken up into heaven by Moroni the angel because they were to be kept sacred. This thereby offers no proof of the Book of Mormon. So, it is with the story here. The Charles Anthon story is he affirmed it's in writing. He affirmed it. Then thought about it, and then he asked for it back and ripped it up, right? So it's like a claim of like, there was proof, there really was. And the only proof we have of it is a claim in a story. Charles Anthon himself, interestingly enough, he denies the story of Joseph Smith. In a letter that he wrote in 1834, Charles Anthon himself denies the story in 1834. Joseph Smith wrote his history in 1838, 4 years later. And we're going to go to that. Let's see here. So in here, we're going to start here. Oh, wrong way. So, in this letter from Charles Anthon, the guy that is quoted, New York, February 17th, 1834, Dear Sir, I received this morning your favor of the 9th instant, and lose no time in making a reply. The whole story about my having pronounced the Mormonite inscription to be Reformed Egyptian hieroglyphics is completely false. Some years ago, a plain and apparent simple-hearted farmer called upon me with a note from Dr. Mitchell of our city, now deceased, requesting me to decipher, if possible, a paper which the farmer would hand me, and which Dr. M. confessed he had been unable to understand. Upon examining the paper in question, I soon came to the conclusion that it was all a trick, perhaps a hoax. When I asked the person who brought it how he obtained the writing, he gave me, as far as I could now recollect, the following account. A gold book, consisting of a number of plates of gold, and fastened together in the shape of a book by wires of the same metal, had been dug up in the northern part of the state of New York, and along with the book an enormous pair of gold spectacles. These spectacles were so large that if a person attempted to look through them, his 2 eyes would have to be turned towards one of the glasses, merely the spectacles in question being altogether too large for the breadth of the human face. Whoever examined the plates through the spectacles was enabled not only to read them, but fully to understand their meaning. And all this knowledge, however, was confined at that time to a young man who had the trunk containing the book and spectacles in his sole possession. This young man was placed behind a curtain in the garret of a farm house, and being thus concealed from view, put on the spectacles occasionally, or rather looked through one of the glasses, deciphered the characters in the book, and having committed some of them to paper, handed copies from behind the curtain to those who stood on the outside. Not a word, however, was said about the plates having been deciphered by the gift of God. Everything in this way was effected by the large pair of spectacles. The farmer added that he had been requested to contribute a sum of money towards the publication of the gold book, and contents of which would, as he had been assured, produce an entire change in the world and save it from ruin. So urgent had been these solicitations that he intended selling his farm and handing over the amount received to those who wished to publish the plates. As a last precautionary step, however, he had resolved to come to New York and obtain the opinion of the learned about the meaning of the paper which he had brought with him, and which he had given him as a part of the contents of the book, although no translation had been furnished at the time by the young man with the spectacles. On hearing this odd story, I changed my opinion about the paper, and instead of reviewing it any longer as a hoax upon the learned, I began to regard it as part of the scheme to cheat the farmer of his money, and I communicated my suspicions to him, warning him to beware of rogues. He requested an opinion for me in writing, which of course I declined giving, and he then took his leave, carrying the paper with him. The paper was in fact a singular scrawl. It consisted of all kinds of crooked characters, disposed in columns, and had evidently been prepared by some person who had before him at the time a book containing various alphabets, Greek and Hebrew letters, crosses and flourishes, Roman letters inverted or placed sideways, were arranged in a perpendicular column, and the whole ended in a rude delineation of a circle divided into various compartments, decked with various strange marks, and evidently copied after the Mexican calendar given by Humboldt, but copied in such a way as not to betray the source whence it was derived. I am thus particular as to the contents of the paper, inasmuch as I have frequently conversed with my friends on the subject, since the Mormonite excitement began, and well remember that the paper contained anything else but Egyptian hieroglyphs. Some time after, the same farmer paid me a second visit. He brought with him the gold plates in print, and offered it to me for sale. I declined purchasing. He then asked permission to leave the book with me for an examination. I declined receiving it, although his manner was strangely urgent. I adverted once more to the roguery that had been, in my opinion, practiced upon him, and asked him what had become of the gold plates. He informed me that they were in a trunk with a large pair of spectacles. I advised him to go to the magistrate and have the trunk examined. He said the curse of God would come upon him should he do this. On my pressing him, however, to pursue the course which I had recommended, he told me that he would open the trunk if I would take the curse of God upon myself. I replied that I would do so with the greatest willingness, and would incur every risk of that nature, provided I could only extricate him from the grasp of rogues. He then left me. So, moving on, that was in a letter from Charles Anthony himself, right? Let's see. Now, concerning the statement and claim that Charles Anthony said that the translation was more so correct than any he had before seen translated from the Egyptian. That was the Joseph Smith version of the story. I would say this is an idealized mindset concerning this supposed story. Firstly, the claim of the Book of Mormon is that it was written on gold plates in Reformed Egyptian. Reforming Egyptian into another script wouldn't match regular ancient Egyptian for Charles Anthony to recognize and to be able to translate more correctly than anyone else. That's the first. Like, just logically, if you've changed the language, how can some guy that knows the old form of the language attest that it is more correct than anything else he's ever seen ever? That's the first logical, conclusion I get from it. Historically, now, Egyptian hieroglyphs were not able to be translated until 1822. That's 8 years before the supposed Book of Mormon comes out, right? So the Book of Mormon was published in 1830. In 1822, French linguist Jean-François Champollion, I made that up, I don't know how to say that, deciphered the Rosetta Stone to figure out how to read ancient Egyptian. The Rosetta Stone was a pillar that commemorated Ptolemy V Epiphanes. It was a decree or commemoration stone, which included the same decree within 3 different languages, separated by lines at the bottom of each language. It was in ancient Egyptian, Demotic Egyptian, and ancient Greek. Using knowledge of ancient Greek and Demotic, Jean-François Champollion figured out how to read the ancient Egyptian. Basically, what is called Demotic is like cursive Egyptian, and then ancient Greek. We know ancient Greek because of so many manuscripts of the Bible. So he took those and was like, we have the same paragraph in 3 different languages. We don't know one of them. I will use these 2 to figure out ancient Egyptian, and he figured it out. There was 2 people trying at the time, so he figured it out, right? From this fact, it is laughable to say that some characters scrawled on a piece of paper, a sheet of paper, with Joseph Smith's translation would be more correct than anything that some guy had seen translated from the Egyptian. Do you get what I'm saying here? If you have 3 versions of a language, you have ancient Egyptian, Demotic Egyptian, and then ancient Greek, and you translate them to English, you have 3 examples of what the words mean. You know what 2 of them mean, so you can decipher ancient. How could some writing on some piece of paper from the supposed translation of Joseph Smith with Reformed Egyptian, not Egyptian, how can some guy read that and say that this is absolutely the most correct that I've ever seen when it's changed from the original? You're using the original, and you know how to translate the original perfectly because you have 3 examples of how to do it. Anyway, to go a little bit more on the what is it called? The Rosetta Stone. Here's some pictures of it. So you have the Rosetta Stone, right? From this section upwards is ancient Egyptian. From this section downwards is Demotic Egyptian, which is the cursive style of Egyptian. I don't know what any of this is, but we're just using it as an example, right? And then further down is a different picture. You have the Demotic Egyptian here, and then ancient Greek. The same paragraph 3 times. And I think that's the end of what I prepared. So from this, I think it is laughable to look at this old Isaiah 29 and misinterpret it to mean some version of a prophecy of the future, when clearly in the text it uses a simile. It is saying that the vision of the prophets, rulers, and seers has been like this story. If you were to take a book to someone and it's a sealed scroll, they didn't even have books back then, they had scrolls. So if you take a sealed scroll to someone and you say, read this, the person's going to say, I can't read this because it's sealed. The reason why they would say sealed like that is because a seal meant that whoever has authority should be able to read it. So it even goes against it in that as well. So it says the vision is like that. The vision, the eyes of the prophets, rulers, and seers are closed to the point that if you took them a book, they would be like, I can't even read this, right? It's using a simile. Anyway, that is the deep dive study on this. Hopefully you enjoyed, and we will see you again in another video. And if you liked it, give it a like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, leave it in the comments below. Tell me if you agree with me. If you disagree with me, tell me why I'm wrong. Thank you.